Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, home of all things stock, investment, and personal finance related. Now for today's video, we're going to be welcoming the CEO of NKGen Biotech. This is a super exciting sector, and we're interested to cover some recent news that came out in relation to this company. Now before we get into it, please take a second, hit the like button, you guys. It's a big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let me know in the comment section below if you're currently holding shares of NKGen Biotech, what your thoughts are on this sector overall, and your outlook moving into 2024. Now with that being said, let's get into today's interview. Okay guys, so that's right, we've got the CEO, Paul Song, happens to be an MD and the CEO of NKGen Biotech to talk about this organization. We were just saying off camera, the biotech space has been super exciting and hot from a retail investment standpoint, and Paul's here to give us an update on his organization. So thanks so much for your time here today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
You're always welcome, my friend. Now, the first question for you, can you tell us a little bit of a background in terms of yourself and how you ended up at NKGen Biotech?
Sure. Well, I am an oncologist by training. I practiced for over 20 years. The last full-time role I had was on the faculty at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Beverly Hills, California, and really focused on all cancers that were associated with human papillomavirus, whether they be cancers of the head and neck or cervix cancer, anal cancer and things. It was during that time as an oncologist that my own father came down with cancer. And in spite of all the work I had done, there was really nothing that showed promise for him. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his cancer quite quickly in a matter of 9 months. And it was during that time I realized maybe there were other ways to approach disease in general. And I have an immunology background as well. And I really started to look at what people were doing with natural killer cells, and was introduced to the founder of this company. He asked me to join first as an advisor and then as the chief medical officer. And then subsequently, I took over as CEO of the U.S. Operations in January of 2023. So just about a year ago.
Okay, great. Sorry to hear about your father. Unfortunately, I had a similar situation with my father-in-law last Christmas, and I always like to bring that up with a lot of these type of companies that we look at it from an investment standpoint, but it is really impactful to thousands and hundreds of thousands of lives around the world. So the work you guys are doing is super important. Now, shifting gears a little bit, can you talk about NKGen's platform and some of the technologies that you guys are advancing there?
Yes, absolutely. So natural killer cells are a part of the body, an immune cell. And let me just explain to the viewers who may not be familiar with that, is that, our body's basically broken down into white blood cells that fight infection and all sorts of things, red blood cells that carry oxygen, and platelets that help our bodies clot whenever we have cuts. Within the white blood cells, there are two major types of cells. There are T cells, and that's what you hear a lot of people developing CAR T, which is designed for certain liquid tumors, and then NK cells or natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are really undervalued and misunderstood, but they are the first line of defense in all of our bodies when we produce cancer cells from time to time, and we have viral infections, when we have our immune systems go sort of awry and start to attack ourselves. The natural killer cells are the cells that really police the body and really root out those things in our body that shouldn't be there through a slew of mechanisms and receptors. But as we get older, or if our lifestyles are not very healthy, if due to lack of sleep or diet or some stress, our immune systems can get weaker on any given moment. And natural killer cells are very, very temperamental. So we set out to develop a platform, not just to tackle cancer, but other diseases, where we could take patients' own natural killer cells, grow them into large quantities, but also make them extremely powerful. So greatly enhance their strength, their ability to recognize things in our body that shouldn't be there. And it's this proprietary platform that we've developed that has allowed us to not only use these natural killer cells to tackle cancer, but also neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and such. What makes our company very unique is that natural killer cells are very, very difficult to get to grow. And most of the companies that are, quote, in the NK or natural killer cell space do not get everyone's cells to grow, and then rather they rely on a universal donor. So if you're treated by some of those other companies, what they'll do is they will take some patient that they identified whose natural killer cells can grow, and then they will give those to another patient. So you don't always get your own natural killer cells in that situation, and they're engineered to go after a specific tumor target. Ours are greatly enhanced. We make them about 400 times more powerful so that, again, when we give them back to patients, there's no side effects because they're your own cells. They're not genetically modified, but they've been greatly strengthened. It's almost like we put them through a boot camp, made them much stronger and more powerful, so that when they go back in your body, they're even better at doing what they're supposed to do, and we've created many, many more as well.
Gotcha. So just so I'm kind of summarizing this, we've talked about some of those CAR T companies on the channel before. You're saying the NK or natural killer is somewhat overlooked or underestimated in the space, so kind of a point of differentiation there. And then not only are you guys multiplying them, you're making them stronger, but you're using the individual patients' NK cells as opposed to kind of some universal one-size-fits-all type of thing.
It's great summary. One thing I will add is I think CAR T is terrific. The reason what I was pointing out is that there are associated side effects with CAR T. There's quite a bit of cytokine release, and what people were trying to do was, could we, instead of using T cells, use NK cells and create CAR NK cells for cancer? And those are the companies, a lot of the companies that are publicly traded, that have really fallen short in terms of their ability to see the same results, particularly in the leukemia lymphoma space. What we set out to do, and again, I'm an oncologist, so having a cancer background, I wanted to not really try to engineer these cells to focus on a cancer mutation, but rather, could we make them more powerful to make other existing cancer therapies better? Or when we put them back into patients for other diseases, could they really maximize their potential of what they're supposed to do? If your viewers were to do a Google search and put in weak natural killer cells and correlate it with lots of diseases, everything from cancer to autoimmune diseases such as psoriasis, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, to even autism, you'll find thousands of publications that correlate disease with weak or deficient numbers of natural killer cells. So we felt if we could create a way to tackle that problem, that we would have a much broader usage across numerous diseases, not just cancer.
Gotcha. And from an investment standpoint, a much larger TAM or total addressable market, I suppose. So appreciate kind of the layman's terms or explanation there. This is obviously very complicated stuff, and I like to just kind of summarize for the viewers because it may be not stuff we interact with every day. Now, from my understanding, Paul, you also announced some pretty exciting news last month. I think the 24th and 26th you noted. Can you talk about some of those developments? Because we are starting to see a lot of catalysts from NKGen and really some excitement in the investment community.
Absolutely. So, prior to our announcements last week, no one had really ever thought of using natural killer cells to tackle Alzheimer's disease. There was no prior publications, there was no really prior precedent, and nobody at any of the leading universities had even thought to use natural killer cells in this disease. Early on, we had started to see some signal that when we gave our natural killer cells through an IV, they were able to get up into the brain and really start to improve the cognitive function of patients with pretty advanced dementia. So we set about to do a phase 1 trial where we took patients with an average mini mental status score of 14. To put that in perspective, you have other companies such as Eli Lilly and Eisai that have used their antibodies to target the proteins that accumulate in Alzheimer's patients. They took patients that had earlier stage, what we call mild cognitive impairment, with scores in the mid-20s. So we took more advanced patients, but we're able to show that when we gave our cells through an IV, they got up into the brain to help reduce proteins that accumulate that are associated with Alzheimer's disease, notably a protein called amyloid protein and a second protein called p-tau. And then the third part is that the natural killer cells seem to reduce the neuroinflammation in the brain. And we were able to document all of that via cerebral spinal fluid analysis. So we measured levels of proteins and neuroinflammatory markers before we gave the first treatment. After 4 treatments, we measured them again. And then 3 months after treatment, we measured them. And we found that our NK cells indeed, simply given IV, got into the brain, helped to reduce the proteins and the neuroinflammation. So we presented that data at the Clinical Trials Alzheimer's Disease Conference in Boston about 10 days ago. And it was very well received. And it was the first time that, there was any mention of natural killer cells being used for this, but also showing some real efficacy. In addition to the reduction in the proteins and the neuroinflammation, we looked at cognitive function. And again, right now, the bar is so low in Alzheimer's disease that the best people can say is that when they give their drug, it reduces the level of decline. So nobody gets better with the current treatments that are out there, but all it does is, compared to the group that doesn't get anything or gets the placebo, the group that got the drugs targeting the amyloid proteins, their rate of decline was slower, but it was still a decline. So what we showed is in our phase 1 trial, one, that was very safe, but secondly, 90% of our patients either remained stable instead of getting worse, they stopped getting worse, or actually got better. And this was, again, despite the fact that we took more advanced patients, we were able to show that we actually stopped worsening or improved their cognitive function. So based on all of that, we're very excited. And the second announcement we had was that the US FDA gave us approval to move forward with a phase 1/2A trial based on the data that we had presented and our science and all of our application. So we will start enrolling patients in this trial before the end of the year, most likely in late December of this year. This trial will be focused on a more advanced population, patients with moderate Alzheimer's disease. It should be noted for your viewers that right now it's estimated there are about 55 million people in the entire world that have some form of dementia, of which 45 million have either Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. And right now there is no treatment that has actually gotten anyone better. So while most of the biotech community and even the medical community have largely ignored the more advanced patients because they just haven't found anything that works, and they've focused on something called mild cognitive impairment, or the earliest stages, we believe that there's a real potential to help the more advanced patients, and that's what our trial will be focused on. So we're very excited to present our data, and also the fact that the US FDA greenlighted our next trial.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, first of all, congrats. And you're right. I've never heard patients getting better. Maybe it slows progression, but yeah, dementia and Alzheimer's is obviously debilitating. And if people can get back some sort of quality of life rather than just slowing degeneration, that's amazing. And I guess to your earlier point, Paul, another great example of how versatile this NK treatment or platform is, hey?
Yes, absolutely. And again, put it in perspective, as you mentioned, the current paradigm is without drug, you go rapidly declining. And then with the drug, maybe the curve slows a little bit. What we showed is that 90% of our patients either stopped, meaning they remained flat, or they actually improved. And so with our next trial that will begin later this year, we're very excited that one, we're going to be giving even a higher dose than we gave in our phase 1. And the US FDA asked us to treat for a full year. In that data that we presented in Boston 2 weeks ago, we only gave 4 treatments. And despite the fact that we gave so few treatments, we saw such dramatic results. So we actually think that giving a higher dose for a longer period of time, we may even see even better outcomes than what we saw in our phase 1. We're very optimistic about that.
No kidding. Not to mention you're treating more advanced stage patients than a lot of the existing ones. So no, phenomenal. And that kind of leads perfectly into the next question here. Why do you feel the this space specifically is getting so much investor attention right now? Is it just because it is so underserved and undermet right now?
Yeah, it's very it's a sad problem that our world faces, particularly as we as a population get older. But as I mentioned, 55 million people in the world have some form of dementia. And when you look at the emotional and the physical and the economic toll it has on our society, my best man in my wedding's mom has advanced Alzheimer's, having to pay for constant caregivers, having to take time off from work, the loss of productivity to both the patient but the patient's family, not to mention the economic toll of what this will do to our society, and yet the fact that we don't have anything that can adequately address this is a wide open field. And really what we set out to do as a company was we wanted to really make a difference in a way that would improve not only the patients' lives, patients' families' lives, and do it in a way where it was non-toxic, and really started to dig into the science of how our own immune systems could potentially help with this solution.
For sure. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and that's why I've loved covering the biotech space. I learned so much, and you're right. It just rips families apart when people come down with this stuff. So, as I mentioned in relation to the cancer, it's great work that you're doing, and this is another example. Now, I know we talked about some of the big press releases from last month. In terms of viewers watching this, what can they look for kind of the next catalysts on the horizon here?
Well, right now, our biggest emphasis has been on Alzheimer's because, again, it's truly an unmet need, and particularly the more advanced patients. But we also currently have a phase 1 trial going on in advanced solid tumors and in cancer. And we should expect to see our first data readout sometime in February or March, so very soon. These are patients that have failed basically every treatment up to date. And what we are doing is, in that situation, using our cryopreserved, what we call off-the-shelf allogeneic cell therapy in solid tumors. And this is the first and only natural killer cell therapy for cancer that doesn't require patients to get chemotherapy first. So just a quick point to the viewers is that when you look at using someone else's cells for cancer, what happens is many times the way they're engineered or such, if I was to take my cells that I've engineered and put them into, say, your immune system would tend to destroy them before they ever get to the target. So the way they get around that is they try to give you some chemotherapy to weaken your immune system so that it allows these natural killer cells to get to the cancer before your immune system destroys them. Our natural killer cell therapy for cancer has been grown in such a way, and we can produce such a large amount that we do not need to give you something to weaken your immune system before we give them to you. So this is extremely beneficial for cancer patients who have already been beaten up quite a bit, having had 5, 6 lines of therapy. They're all so weak. So if we don't have to weaken their immune systems further, and then we can give them these highly enhanced natural killer cells, that's what we're very excited about. So we've enrolled, I think, 5 patients thus far, and we'll have the clinical readout of that sometime in February. So our work in cancer, while we have stressed it less than our work in Alzheimer's, we believe is significant and meaningful. Based on that data, we will then do some combination trials with some big pharma partners, which we'll probably announce sometime next year. And that's what we're doing in cancer. As far as Alzheimer's disease, the other thing I just want to mention with regard to the FDA giving us our green light for the next trial is if you look at most of the trials that are done in Alzheimer's disease, they're done in early stage disease and they require huge numbers of patients, cost hundreds of millions of dollars to do. Because when you have a drug that works marginally well, you need 800 patients in each arm to tease out subtle differences. When we're looking at a more advanced population for whom there is no hope and there has been no proven therapy, the US FDA only asked us to treat 30 patients total. They asked us to treat 10 with placebo and 20 with our enhanced natural killer cell product. And the reason is when you have more advanced population, you can see differences in outcomes very, very quickly. So as we start to enroll patients in December, we think probably by June or July of next year, so very quickly, at a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time, we're going to be able to demonstrate that our cells clearly make a difference in these people's lives. So it's a much more efficient process from an investment standpoint. We'll see signal much, much faster. And so for anyone who's interested in what we're doing as a company, they don't have to wait years to see the results.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I know these development pipelines are lengthy, and I didn't realize there's differences based on the severity of the case. But you bring up a great point there, and obviously the more advanced, the easier it is to spot improvements. So shifting gears a little bit here, Paul, we've had a number of CEOs on over the last couple of months and talking about some of the macro trends we're seeing in the biotech space across the world in North America. AI seems to be one that's a trend everywhere right now. Can you speak to us a little bit on a macro scale? What are kind of some of the headwinds and tailwinds you guys are witnessing right now?
I think that the biotech sector in general has been very challenging for the past 2 or 3 years. If you look at the number of biotech companies who have had struggled with their lead candidates, those that are being that are on the markets right now that are trading below cash. It's been very, very challenging. Having said that, I do think that it's put more of an emphasis on results and science and real human data versus something that was conceived on a chalkboard or cured in a petri dish or in a mouse. So what we felt confident was finally going to the markets, whereas a lot of companies in the natural killer cell therapy space went to the markets way before we did with far less clinical data. We felt based on the strong signal we found in our phase 1 trial in Alzheimer's disease, as well as the work we had done in cancer, that we were far less risky in terms of what we were going after, that there was enough signal. Before we started to actually get human data, both in terms of cognitive improvement and biomarker data, there were quite a few people that were skeptical that natural killer cells played any role in Alzheimer's disease as a therapeutic. But now that we've announced the data and shown the biomarker data and the science, as well as gotten the FDA stamp of approval to move forward, there's no longer that doubt or skepticism. I think people see this as something that has a real potential for a truly unmet need. But I think in general, the biotech sector needs to have, based on the last several years, you're seeing it. Pharma is much more interested in looking at later stage companies before they shell out big, licensing or M&A deals, as well as it's made the bar higher for all of us, and I think that's actually a good thing. So, certainly I think things could change. I think the biotech sector has been slumbering for a little while, but I do think there will be some exciting data coming out in 2024, and it could be a very positive year for the sector in general, and certainly for our company.
Yeah, most definitely. And I would tend to agree. And from a retail investment standpoint, this is exactly when you want to be doing your research and taking positions because of some of that volatility. Sounds like a bit of a shakeup in the space. But as you mentioned, Paul, if it's backed by science, it's just a matter of time until the investment community picks up on these stories. So really informative today. I appreciate your time. I know you mentioned some dates over the next few quarters, so we'll be sure to have you back and provide the viewers with some regular updates. I'll leave your guys' information in the video description below, but I just wanted to kick it back to you for any closing or final thoughts.
The last thing I would just like to say is that for some of your viewers, most of whom I think are in Canada, we're actually looking to open a clinical site for our clinical trial in Canada as well. We are submitting the paperwork to the Canadian FDA now that we've gotten the US FDA approval. because we understand that this is a global problem, and we would love to really make this. Two of my trusted employees, including my COO, is from Canada, so we would really like to have this available to Canadians as well. And then the final thing is that I really just appreciate your time learning more about our story. And for any of your viewers that want to learn more about what we're doing, they can go to our company website, www.nkgenbiotech.com. We also will be filing an IND application with the US FDA in early 2024 to use our NK cells for advanced Parkinson's disease as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I failed to mention that as one of the upcoming highlights. So we have a lot on our plate, and I think people will continue to be pleasantly surprised as we announce more and more data that our approach is very, very different, and there's we're really going after this for all the right reasons. This is something that's personal to me, as I mentioned, and I'm sure many of your viewers and have family members or friends that are going through this. So we really want to make a difference.
Yeah, I would unfortunately tend to agree. It seems everybody knows somebody that's touched by one of these conditions, and we appreciate the work that you guys are doing, Paul. We appreciate your time coming on here, giving us an update about the company, and we look forward to having you back. So thanks so much for your time today. It was great visiting, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks again. Take care.